I wanted to ask you, Regina Public Schools say that they never received any complaints from the minister, either Minister Duncan or Minister Cockerell, about their procedure, which has been in place since June of 2022. What's your response to that?
Yeah, well, it's one of the changes I think that we're part of the discussion with respect to making a policy that has historically been in place largely in our classrooms and across school divisions in the province. One of the changes that was made that precipitated this discussion about making a consistent policy across the province. Second to that, I would say that parents also noticed a change in policy, not only in that school division but other areas of Canada, and have been reaching out to their MLAs, to government MLAs as well over the course of the last period of time. And I would say that reaching out and conversing with their elected government member has increased over the course of the last number of months. And so, at the end of the day, what the government has done is put forward a policy that ultimately makes a consistent policy across the province in classrooms and school divisions across the province. And it's a policy that essentially, by a number of executive directors' admission, as well as the government, mirrors what has largely been in practice in our classrooms, in our schools and in our school divisions for a number of decades now.
The Regina Public Schools also says, that they hadn't received a complaint from parents either. So there's no complaints from parents, and the minister didn't go to the public schools.
I think it's a broader conversation than just one school division as well. We're making consistent across the province in all school divisions what largely was in place already for historical times.
That's
really,
specifically
in the province,
not what your minister said yesterday, though, sir. Your minister said yesterday we were going ahead with this policy, and I can't get the exact quote, but in essence, because he felt that parental rights, the Regina School Division wasn't abiding by parental rights, which I don't think is their policy. So, twofold question. If you're not accurately reflecting the policy, if your minister's not reflecting the policy, do you feel you're on solid ground in terms of pursuing it with one school division that has one particular?
Certainly we are, and I think the minister's also indicated that he has had many calls, as other government MLAs have, from parents across the province, urging the government to make a policy that has largely been in place consistent across the province, regardless of where you live. It's an elected government that has offices and points of connection across the province that are making a policy decision that ultimately I would say they are elected to do.
But ultimately we haven't seen the impetus for this. We haven't seen those letters. We haven't seen that specifically what's been put to the government. Why can't we have some communication? Why can't we have a bit of a communication that you perceive that's prompted this decision?
There's conversations, correspondence that come into MLA offices, ultimately that come into to minister offices, as well as was quoted, some that comes in to ministries. Not all of that correspondence is available as people converse with their elected member, and that has been a long-standing tradition across the province for, if not decades, over a century now. And so most certainly, government MLAs are discussing at various levels with their constituents as to what the policy direction of the government should be in this case, have been for many months and in excess of a year now, and there are other aspects that come into this discussion as well.
Are you really ignoring the right, what you're hearing from the other side, though?
Pardon me?
I ask that sincerely because there's 1,000 people out there and a handful of people supporting your government position, but I don't know if you necessarily agree with everything in that handful have to say. You have a lot of parents. You have the commissioner right now resigning, Human Rights Commissioner, over this. There's a lot of people out there that are saying you're tone deaf.
There's very much people on both sides of this conversation, and I think even the media needs to recognize that. With respect to the government, we are listening to all people. Yes, moving in the direction of what parents are asking us to do, making a policy that was largely in place, consistent across the province, but also paying attention to how we are supporting students. And ultimately, at the end of the day, politics aside, and the public discussion on this policy today, which has been in place for decades, largely in our school divisions, it's about supporting our children. And we believe firmly that including parents in their children's education is doing just that, supporting their children. We also believe that bringing a mental health first aid individual into each of our schools is supporting our children. We believe that expanding our rapid access counseling service, which is available, I believe, in 30 communities today, but expanding that to 13 communities specifically for youth supports in the school and in the community, that is supporting our youth and our children today. If there's other opportunities that we have as a government to support either our school divisions or our health region or other community-based organizations in supporting those kids, we're going to look at that.
I get that, but accepting what you say, and what you said makes perfect sense to me, at least standing here, then you would be supportive of the Regina Board of Education policy that basically says we're going to go to we'll work with the kids to go there first. You wouldn't be moving ahead with notions that we heard yesterday that this is about protecting parental rights, which the policy isn't. It does seem, despite the fact that you have said in House today, you said again today, and I appreciate that politics is involved, it does seem that there is a political desire to message something specific, similar to what we've seen with the Saskatchewan Party in the election, and maybe your candidate during the Lumsden Morris by-election. What do you say when people say, look, I just don't believe you? This does very much seem to be driven by the politics.
Actually, people, as we talk to folks that have varying opinions on this policy, I would say, first of all, the vast majority believe that having parents involved, even the experts, most certainly believe that having the parents involved to support their children through whatever difficult decision, important decision that their children are considering, most certainly is one of the strongest people that they can have in their lives through that discussion. As we see parents reaching out to their MLAs, as we see, yes, an elevated discussion through a by-election, which was another part of this policy, which ensured that parents were aware of what is being taught in the health and wellness classes of their children. Yes, as we see school division markedly change a policy, and we are taking the advice of Saskatchewan parents, and I would say others, in standardizing and making consistent a policy across all 27 school divisions in the province. That was done first by policy. We had said and been consistent since the beginning, if that policy we were ever to find that policy was not in effect, and that we'd use the tools available to the government to ensure that is in effect, and that's why we're here today.
Are you comfortable overriding the rights of children using the Human Rights Code and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in this policy?
Well, again, with respect to a policy that, and we do accept the fact that this policy has largely been in place through practice or policy across the province for decades, for the history of the province, really. A public discussion today on what this policy is and what this isn't, but essentially this is a policy that has been abided by and enacted by school after school after school, school division after school division after school division. Very public discussion today, due in part to, yes, some material that was provided in a classroom by a third-party organization. Very public discussion today, yes, because partially we had a school division that has changed from what has traditionally been the policy in our schools in the province. And that's really what you see the government doing today, is returning us to what has traditionally been a status quo, regardless of where you live, whether you live in Prince Albert, Saskatoon, Regina, or any of our rural communities.
But these policies and law didn't have the notwithstanding clause put on top of it, and didn't have the Charter of Rights specifically, and the Human Rights Code saying. Yeah. And also saying that your government can't be sued if something bad were to happen from this policy. That didn't exist before.
But they were in effect by policy or by practice, largely across schools, school divisions, and in our classrooms across the province. So we've been consistent from day one to make the policy, first of all, that we introduced consistent across the province. We were also consistent that if that status quo policy was ever not in effect, that we would use the tools available, and unfortunately these are the tools that are available and are necessary.
When it comes to that clause around essentially insulating yourself from legal action being sued, doesn't that essentially tacitly admit that there's a possibility of harm being done as a result of
And no, I think it recognizes the court decision, but also recognizes the consistency of where this government has been. Is that there's tools available to ensure that elected members, elected governments do have the ability, whether it's a collision of rights or whatever that might be, to ensure that the elected members of the day are utilizing all of the tools, whether it be in the Constitution or the tools that governments have, to ensure that they're moving forward on a policy that the people of Saskatchewan have asked for.
There's something explicitly saying that, if should harm occur, we're not liable. You can't sue us. Doesn't that admit that there's a
Well, yeah, I find that
I
find that perplexing that it's necessary to some degree as well when you recognize that this has been the policy that has largely been enacted and put in place in our classrooms for decades, literally for decades, in schools right across the province, up to and including the very day when the judge had made his ruling on the provincial policy, which was essentially to standardize that status quo policy.
How do you feel about, because you're a bit of a libertarian in terms of people's rights?
That's quite an assumption, but.
Well, I think I'm good with that one. But you actually, you are an advocate for individual rights and freedoms as per, I think things I've said recently. I would think that in that situation you'd be a little bit uncomfortable with what Alec just outlined in terms of a law.
Yeah.
Keeps anybody from
Yeah, I also very much am of the belief that parents most certainly are supportive of their children, and that when their children are experiencing significant decisions in their life, that their parents most certainly need to be a part of that support group that are helping and educating that child through whatever that decision may be. And so if bringing parents through a consistent policy that, as I said, has largely been in place for decades, but ensuring that parents can continue to be involved in their child's classroom and education has a label, that's fine.
So you've heard from the judge, from the former Human Rights Commissioner, from experts, from the federal justice minister, I believe, from parents, that this would bring harm to children and who have opposed this policy. What would it actually take to change your mind on this policy?
The government is not changing their mind. We've been clear from the very beginning that we will utilize the tools to ensure that this policy is in place, as it has been for decades across the province. The conversation that I think we should always be having and continue to have in Saskatchewan is how do we support, in this case, children, yes, in our schools, but also in our community, when they face very significant decisions, and I think, in fairness today, significant pressures that maybe are coming quicker and more often than they did a decade or two ago. So as I said, we've expanded the mental health first aid access in our schools. We've expanded our rapid access counseling in our schools, and if there are other areas where we can provide those supports for children that are facing whatever the challenge might be in their life, we want to have that conversation to support that child. That's what this policy is about, is including parents in their child's education in an effort to support that child. And if there's other supports that are available in addition to what are already available, we want to have that conversation.
Are representatives being given the right to vote with their conscience, or are they being told if they don't vote a certain way that they will be excluded from the Saskatchewan?
Representatives in the House?
Yes.
Oh, I would say, like you're asking if it's a whip vote or not. We haven't even had that discussion, but I would say that my experience as government caucus members are very much supportive of this policy due to the conversations that they have had with their constituents across the province.
So they will not be
This policy is here ultimately because our caucus members have brought this policy forward as an important policy that the government should be moving on.
But they won't be penalized if they use their conscience and vote against it.
We haven't even had that discussion.
As part of the Regina Public policy as it relates to privacy and confidentiality, it says division staff will respect confidentiality and privacy, and not disclose sexual orientation, gender identity, and/or gender expression of students unless the student has given permission or there is an impending safety concern. Is that specifically what you found objectionable about the Regina Public School policy?
That's the policy that I think was added or changed from what has historically been the place, been historic. Well, and that's where this discussion began. It's been going on for a period of time, but I would say that. Do you want the answer or no? Because I'll go through the answer. That's, I would say, one of the precipitous is that would have spurred a number of parents to start reaching out to their elected members. Another would have been some of the information that was provided in a school in Lumsden during the by-election, yes, but I would say there's been an increasing communication of parents to their elected members over the course of the last year or two or three with respect to policies that are in our schools. And as we have always said, and we continue to say today, as we make what has historically been the policy in Saskatchewan schools consistent across all of our school divisions, is this is an opportunity for parents to reassess their involvement in their child's life. Reach out to your teacher, principal, school division directly, board representative, and become even more involved in your school community council. At the end of the day, the most responsive education system is only really going to be evident and present when parents are involved in their child's life and in their child's education.
You seem to be suggesting this is an exceedingly nuanced debate, and we get that because that's back and forth that we get. Your policies don't seem to reflect that, or the way the policies are being pronounced in the House don't seem to reflect that, nor did your minister, who yesterday actually said something opposite to what was just read to you.
No, I think it's alongside.
Pardon me?
Would be alongside why we're having this discussion. And one of the...
I don't know if I understand what that means.
Well, I don't understand your question as well, because I think we come at it from just a similar perspective, but maybe slightly different. There's a number of things that have, I think in many ways, spurred not only the conversation in our caucus and in the government, but spurred the conversation in families, with families across the province wherever their children might be going to school, and ultimately spurred those parents or those family members to reach out on whatever side.
Fair enough. Let me go about a different way.
Yeah.
You're using a blunt instrument for an incredibly nuanced debate.
The
blunt instrument is notwithstanding. The blunt instrument is why you had a human rights commissioner resign yesterday, because you're overriding. It does seem to me and a lot of other people that this issue requires a lot more nuanced debate than what we're hearing from the minister and maybe what we're hearing from the House in terms of arguments back and forth. Why not pause it so that there is better understanding and at least the perception that government has listened to these voices out there that want to tell you this is a very nuanced debate and you might be wrong.
With respect to one of a number of human rights commissioners, I work alongside the chief human rights commissioner. Again, I just say again, we thank her for her service, most certainly, as we have what is a very public discussion around with respect to an education policy of including parents in their child's education, in their child's classroom, that has largely been in place for decades now. With respect to the policy itself and why we're here today, the initial intent of the government was to standardize a policy across school divisions. That was the initial move by the government. We've been consistent from day one that if we found ourselves in a position where an already existing policy in school divisions across the province would not be in effect, that we would utilize the tools available to the government, and as I said, those tools are being utilized today. So we've been consistent with that message from the very introduction of the original standardization of a policy that was in effect in many school divisions already.
Regina Public Schools policy, it doesn't explicitly state exclude parents,
but it's different than what was already in place.
But it doesn't explicitly state exclude parents.
Which is
what
fine.
It says is for pronouns at the request of a student or a student's parent/guardian. So in that mind, that looks inclusionary. When you look at that, was that problematic?
No, I think as you standardize this policy across divisions, in part precipitated by a change that in this case Regina Public had made, but not wholly, but in part, it's not so much about the Regina Public policy, what it actually states, but it's with respect to they changed from where we traditionally have been in this province. Most of the school divisions are still where we've traditionally have been in this province, and including parents in their child's classroom to every degree that they can. And what we have said is we brought forward a policy that would standardize that among all the school divisions, and unfortunately that policy found its day in court. And we have been consistent from day one that we'd use the tools available to government to ensure that it is in place, and that's why we're here today.
In June,
Couple
right
last
after it
questions.
happened, why did the minister inquire with the school board, with Regina Public Schools about the policy? Why didn't the minister?
Why I don't know that he did or didn't. And
Regina Public Schools says
Well, he said
didn't.
yesterday he did, sir. And
Okay.
Yeah, sir, go ahead, Jerry.
I don't know if the
But-
previous minister has talked to him or not. It's a question that I haven't asked.
The ministry, I guess. Why didn't that happen?
I don't know that it didn't. Like, I can't answer that question because I haven't asked.
Because you're saying, I don't know, the school board says it doesn't happen, so that leaves us kind of like, where's the truth?
Me too. You know, I don't know what conversations have happened between the ministry and specific school divisions on this policy or others. I don't know on the previous minister, but what I do know is with respect to the government's intent to standardize what has been an existing policy in you know, largely for decades now. We had brought forward a policy to standardize that. We've indicated from the very beginning that policy will be in place, and we'll utilize the tools that are necessary to ensure that's the case. Again, that's why we're here today. That's what we've been asked to do as a duly elected government in this province by many. That being said, we understand there's debate, very public debate with respect to this policy, and where there are opportunities to add to already existing supports that we have for our children, and let's not forget, this is about supporting children. Bringing parents closer to their child's education is about supporting children. But where there are other supports that may be required, or that where we have suggestions on other supports that would be effective for a child, regardless of the challenge they're facing in their life, we want to have a discussion about that.
Heather Patai, the human rights commissioner that resigned.
Right.
She was a human rights commissioner for 9 years.
Yeah.
She's a parent of a trans child.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, what message does it send to you that somebody in that position that served as a human rights commissioner for nearly a decade, that themselves is affected by
Yeah.
this policy, has kind of put themselves out there and said, I am concerned
Yeah.
this is going to harm children like my child.
Yeah.
And as you talk about parents' rights, there's a parent in a position that she's now resigned, taking a fairly
Yeah.
principled stance.
Yeah, I'd say a few things with respect to that. One, again, I thank you for your service as one of the number of human rights commissioners that we have that work with the chief human rights commissioner. Second, I would say a little bit perplexing, as that policy that is very much being publicly debated today was largely in place in 2014 when she became a human rights commissioner, but was not as publicly debated as ultimately is today. And then last, but certainly not least, I would say, you know, where individuals like Heather, you know, as a parent have a suggestion, maybe to the government of Saskatchewan or others, as to understanding the suite of supports that we have, either directly in our schools or in our communities. If there's additional supports that we can provide as a government or as a school division, we're open to those suggestions, as I think we always are, not just today, as kids you know, go through many challenging events in their life through their teen years, even earlier than that. And we want to ensure that we are looking at every opportunity to support them. But we firmly believe that bringing parents closer to their child's education, closer to their children's classroom, ultimately makes for a more responsive education system, a more supportive education system. And we've been clear from the beginning that this policy that has largely been in place for decades in the province is going to be in place.
By virtue of her resignation, she obviously doesn't think you're open to that, which seems to be a bit of a problem for government when it's the perception is it's not open to listening to human rights commissioners, its citizens, etc. So.
Oh, I would say we are listening to citizens across the province, and you know, where those suggestions you know, might be made to their locally elected MLA. You know, I would say the government always wants to look at those supports that can be provided. Most importantly, I would say to our children in the community or the school, not just today in light of this public discussion. We should always be looking as to ways to and avenues to support our children. That is some of the most important things I think a government can do.
Sorry to cut you off. Whose idea was this? Who came up with the plan specifically on the pronoun naming policy?
Caucus. through guidance, through multiple conversations that they've had with parents.
And second question, did you speak with Premier Higgs about this at all?
I've spoken with a number of premiers across the province about this policy, what it is, what it isn't, how we believe this policy and bringing parents closer to their children's education is about supporting those very children.
Students are planning a walkout today.
Pardon me?
Some students are planning a walkout today in opposition to your policy. Do you have any message for them?
Again, the message I would have for all Saskatchewan residents is this policy is designed to be an inclusive policy and to bring parents closer to their children's lives and closer to their children's education. If there are, suggestions that you might have with respect to adding to the supports that we already have in supporting our kids through, what admittedly is a different environment today than it was maybe when some of us grew up, we always want to be looking at how do we support our children through some very formative years of their life. We firmly believe having every avenue open for parents to be involved as part of that support group is not only the best situation in our opinion, but the best situation as well in many experts' opinion.
Just for
Last
clarity,
question.
you mentioned that this is standardized, and you gave the Northeast School Division as an example. Could you give any other school
Southeast.
divisions?
I read a quote in the House today from the Executive Director of the Southeast School Division where he had indicated this legislation is very much in compliance with the Education Act and in compliance with policies that have been in place for some period of time in that school division. And I would say largely across the province, you'll see school divisions that had either in policy or practice the very focus on the inclusion of parents in their child's education as foremost and paramount in some of the discussions that they have. But I did read a quote in today, I think it was reported on by, I can't remember which media outlet here in the last week or so, with respect to the Southeast School Division, and there's others
So just two school divisions.
that I've mentioned thus far.
Regina Public Schools policy also allows non-binary students able to choose which sport they would like to participate in. Are you supportive of that?
We haven't had that discussion with respect to athletics, and I think maybe some other provinces have, and some of the sports associations, athletic associations, are having that discussion as well. What we have discussed thus far is essentially parental inclusion and the opportunities and avenues for parents to be involved in their classroom and in their child's education, but we have not had that yet.
Will
Thus
you
far.
have that discussion?
I haven't had the discussion about whether or not we'll have the discussion, so yeah, I can't answer that. Thank you, guys.